Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here to Accounting for All Voices, our panel discussion on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. First, thanks to our sponsor, Counsel Services Plus, which is an insurance company that's specifically founded to broker insurance for small nonprofits that are not otherwise attractive to the larger insurance companies. I'm Barbara Paxton. I'm the director of BoardStrong. We're a nonprofit organization. We work to create a vibrant, healthy nonprofit sector by strengthening and improving the governance and management of nonprofit organizations. We do board recruitment and placement, training, consultation, panels like this. We also have a board recruitment platform, boardstrong.org, that connects organizations to talented and diverse board candidates. A few housekeeping rules. You are all on mute. As you've noticed, this webinar is being recorded and you'll receive a link to it tomorrow. Please, you've already introduced yourself in the chat, but use the chat box for any comments or questions. We're going to have this discussion here and try and leave some time at the end for questions. So just put them right in there. And thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. So let's get started. I am very excited to be able to host this panel, and we're very appreciative of all of you who are here and dedicated to this work, especially in the face of what's turning out to be a lot of hostility towards the concept of DEI. With corporations and universities changing their department names to things like Office of Access and Engagement, there is an urgent need for us to keep advocating on behalf of these issues. Today, I'm really pleased to engage in a conversation with three people who are doing this work and have kindly agreed to share their thoughts and experiences with us. So without further ado, let me introduce Freddie Garcia, who's the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Officer at Hudson Gateway Association of Realtors and a co-founder of the Board Institute at the Hudson Valley Pattern for Progress. We have Dr. Sheila Strong, who's the Director of Leadership Development and Equity at the United Way of Greater Rochester and the Finger Lakes, and she's a member of the BoardStrong board. And then we have Dr. Kevin Williams, who's a retired physician and former pharmaceutical executive, and is the co-chair of SAGE, which is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to advocate for LGBTQ plus older people. So let's just get started. Freddie, you want to kick it off by just spending a minute or two telling us about your program and what you do?
Absolutely. Thank you, BoardStrong, Barbara, for having me. Really excited to be here. So quickly, as Barbara mentioned, I'm the co-founder of the Board Institute on the Pattern for Progress. And the Board Institute was created about 3 years ago in order to address representation on boards across the Hudson Valley. And so our goal has been to identify, do some outreach to identify people of color who want to or have served but want to re-serve on boards, train them, give them the tools they need to do that, and then hopefully match them across the Hudson Valley with organizations that they're passionate about, connected with, or engaged with in the community. And so we've done this 3 cycles. Hopefully this year will be our 4th. And we've, kind of not only been able to identify people who want to do this, but I think it also positions organizations who want to do this with the right people in mind. And so it's been a great partnership across the 7 counties that we serve, and we'll continue to do that moving forward.
Fantastic. Sheila, want to share? Whoops, you're on mute.
Yes, so good afternoon. I'm so honored to be here with you today. I am Dr. Sheila Strong. I'm the Director of Leadership Development and Equity at United Way of Greater Rochester and the Finger Lakes. And in my role, I oversee 6 diverse leadership development programs. And they are African American, Latino, Pride, Emerging Leaders, Asian, Pacific Islander, and Indo-American. So the leadership programs aim to prepare individuals for board, volunteer, and leadership positions in the region in which we served. In addition, I oversee the DRIVE team, which focuses on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives at United Way. So United Way has been doing leadership development and equity for over 40 years. So this is not new to United Way, that but I am the first director who has been dedicated to the service that United Way provides. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Kevin?
Hi, good afternoon, good morning to our Los Angeles person. Thanks, Barbara. Thanks for having me on the Sports Strong panel. I'm really excited about this opportunity. As Barbara mentioned, I am Dr. Kevin Williams, recently retired physician, I would say, and pharmaceutical executive. I left Pfizer at the end of December after a 20-year career working in their medical organization. But I think what I bring to today's panel is my experience working on nonprofit boards and with nonprofit organizations over the past 30 years. I have 25 years of experience serving on nonprofit boards of directors and mostly in the LGBTQ plus space and all of those organizations chairing, nominating, and governance committees at some point and being intimately involved in board recruitment. For the past 11 years, I've served on the board of directors of SAGE, which, as Barbara mentioned, is an organization that's focused on advocacy and services for LGBTQ plus elders. I have been co-chair of that board for the past 6 years. And prior to that, chaired their nominating governance and DEI committees. So really excited and looking forward to the conversation today.
Awesome. All right. Well, so why don't we stick with you, Kevin? Why don't you kick us off by telling us a little bit about how you define diversity? How do you think about it as you approach, board service?
Yeah. When I think about diversity, I think about a couple of things. First, that everyone brings to the table their own unique perspective, and that perspective is informed by a number of things. We often tend to focus on just the most obvious, the outward, most obvious characteristic, whether that be gender or race or ethnicity or some other characteristic. But really what people bring to the table is a diverse wealth of experiences and capabilities that inform what their voice is that they bring to the table. And so it's important to recognize that each of the board members that we recruit is not just one thing. They are a number of things. And what we need for them to do is to bring their entire self to board experience. And in doing that, it's important for us then to also treat people with respect and with dignity to ensure that their voice is heard and to create an environment where the voice can be heard.
That's pretty amazing. Sheila, you want to go next?
Sure. So, the definition of diversity is about welcoming the presence of a wide range of individuals from different groups, organizations, and society. And basically, just like Kevin said, so those differences such as race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, age, and all those things, basically the demographics of people. And also, I would like to add lived experiences as diversity. And the importance of having that on the board too. And when I think about diversity, I think about the values and the unique perspectives that people bring to the board. And then once we invite them to the board, we embrace diversity and acknowledge differences, but also fostering inclusivity, equity, and respect for all individuals, regardless of their backgrounds. And it's all about creating an environment where everyone feels respected, valued, and so that they're able to contribute in their fullest potential.
That's great. Buddy, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I was just about to say, I don't think I have anything to add to that. I think, we oftentimes, Kevin, kind of get hooked on the things we can see, the things that folks talk about, the obvious challenges that exist. But I think, to Sheila's point, it's about everything we are, everything we do, what we bring to the table. And what's important when we think about and talk about diversity at the board level is really to think about the context in which we are talking about diversity. And so in certain context, we are talking about race, and that is appropriate. And in another context, we may be talking about something totally different. And so depending on what it is that we're trying to address is really the ways in which we introduce diversity into the conversation.
Thank you. Anyone want to share sort of how you got involved, what motivated you, and how you approach sort of thinking about board composition?
Well, I'll just chime in to say, for me, it's been part of my job and my role, and so I always consider myself one of the lucky individuals that does this for a living. And so for me at the board level, it's really easy to ask the questions because I wear that hat anyway, right? But I think when I think about the reasons why it's important, one of the main reasons for me and any board I've served on, the reason why we did the Board Institute is because of who we serve in our communities. And so a lot of times we don't reflect at the board level the people that we are trying to serve. And when we don't reflect or we don't have that experience or that input, sometimes we miss opportunities. Sometimes we're addressing things that may not matter to the community that probably matters to us. And so it's really I think to me, the reason why it's been important is because we want to ensure that we are efficient and effective in addressing the needs of our community, which in turn means that your board needs to be diverse, needs to be different, needs to adhere to different viewpoints, different voices, different perspectives in order to get to that, maximum effort. And so that to me is the reason why diversity, equity, inclusion has been at the table since the beginning.
So I will chime in. So I will come from a personal place, and it's about social awareness, in which I grew up in the South. I'm not from New York. I'm from born in South Carolina and then raised in Florida. And so growing up, I was able to actually experience and witness the inequalities and injustices in our society. And so I developed a strong awareness of the importance of celebrating and promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion in all aspects of life. Also, through my work, just like Freddie, so my professional experience, I have the opportunity to lead these programs where we focus on the historical marginalized individuals. And so I know the importance of having their voices heard in spaces and right and being able to uplift those voices where sometimes, particular individuals don't have that opportunity to do that. So I am so happy that I get the opportunity to work in the space where I help to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in our community.
I'd like to pick up on a couple of things that Freddie and Sheila said. One of the things that Freddie talked about is that it's important for the board to be reflective of the community that it serves. And I think that is such a critical point. And it's one of the things that has really made me want to get more involved in this work, because I've seen that when you make that effort and you put together a diverse board, the richness of the conversation just increases dramatically. The decision making becomes so much better when you bring in different perspectives, different unique voices. And so, I guess I would say in terms of what's motivated me to do this work is that I've seen it in action, and I've seen how much better the board decision making is and how much richer the conversations are when you have a diverse set of voices opining. Because I have one perspective, and my perspective is very different from someone else's. And often I have found that they have thought of things that I have not. Right? They bring different experiences to the table, different you're saying different lived experiences that really influence the way they see a particular issue, and often in a way that would never occur to me.
So let me just pick up where Kevin left off too, is one of the things that I like to think about a board that is diverse. I think about also intellectual thought, right? It is much more than the demographics, the professional skills and talents that people bring, but being able to have intellectual thoughts so that we can avoid that group thing, right? So everyone is able to think critically and independently because of the things that they have experienced or learned throughout the journey in their lives. So,
Right on.
So well said.
Yeah.
All right, so for the people on our call here who are just sort of starting or facing challenges around thinking about how they bring new people into their organizations, do you have any thoughts about where you get started, how you get started? Anything that are initiatives or practices that you've seen or experienced?
I would say being here is the first step. So that's good. I mean, I think there's
Yeah.
a lot of things you can do. You know, it is interesting. So depending on where you are, you know, in this journey, I think will vary in terms of what you can do. You know, whether it's the first time it's come up at the board, whether it's been a couple years of discussion and maybe, you know, action is to be taken. I think I think the first thing certainly that you can do is one is assess where you are. You know, that includes everything from, I think, demographic data. What does your board, you know, how does your board, is represented?
Right.
Representations are at the board level. I think from an inclusionary standpoint, you know, you can do surveys on experience from people who are on the board, people who've cycled off the board. You know, what has that been like? What, you know, what are the pros? What are the cons? Would you do it again? What could we improve, right? And that you start to get the experience, and that's the inclusion part of it. I also think, you know, thinking about asking either, you know, staff or clients about, you know, what they think about the board. And that's, you know, that 360 cycle, right? Where sometimes you think you're diverse and your staff may say, well, you're not diverse, you know, and then you got to reconcile that a little bit. And so I think there's a lot of ways to do it. The one thing I would say is that if you're new to this in general, obviously like you would if you were reconfiguring your financial books, you would get an expert to help you walk you through that. I would say for DI, it would, you know, take kind of the same approach. Don't jump into it thinking we could do it if you don't think you can, because I think it can create more harm than good. And so certainly, you know, reach out to people who might be able to help you walk you through that. And a third party never hurts as you go through this process as well.
I would love to build on that last comment, Freddie, because that's exactly what we did at Sage like 12 years ago, when we made a decision that we really needed to have a focused effort around DEI. We brought in an outside consultant to do an audit of the organization of the board, looking at a number of different dimensions: management and leadership, human resources, policies, programs, communication, to understand where we were as an organization and where we were as a board, and what were some of the gaps that were identified, and then what are the recommendations on how to address those gaps, so that then we had a roadmap that we could use to help us put in place a plan to figure out how we were going to address some of the gaps that we have identified. So it was incredibly helpful for us as an organization to really begin to get our arms around this huge area right around diversity, equity, and inclusion.
So thank you, Kevin, for sharing that. I would like to just pick up and say, that DEI, it has to be intentional, right? And we need to know why we want diversity, right? So what is it that we're looking for? So, as we assess, not just the skills, and the gaps, assessing also who's on the board, who's on there already and who's missing, so where do we have opportunities? And so I think actually maybe creating a search committee that's diverse, right? I know we have the nomination committees, but being intentional and using a search committee of individuals who are also representative of the diversity in which you're trying to create, and to make sure that they're looking for diverse candidates to fill those spaces, not only the the gaps in skills, but also in terms of demographics. Do we need to add, age? Do we need to have race? So really being intentional and being aware of what you currently have and why you need to bring on different diverse voices.
Let me
One
just,
other,
oh,
okay.
go ahead, Kevin, please.
I was just gonna say, okay, just say one other thing. Yeah, I think it's also important to have the conversation with the board to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Because I think one of the things that we discovered when we had that conversation at the board is that not everybody had the same degree of understanding or belief even of the importance of diversity. So I think, it's really important that if it's something that you're going to be intentional about as an organization and as a board, you need to make sure that you have that conversation and that everybody is aligned and understands the importance of it.
Yeah,
So Kevin, can I just
exactly.
ask, I'm just
Go
gonna
ahead,
ask you
Barbara.
one question. How did you get the people who weren't, we've had a couple of questions in the chat about what do I do about my skeptical, non-believing board member, outlier, hopefully. Can you give us a little insight about how you brought everybody together?
So I will say that we were fortunate, and I don't think there was anybody on the board that didn't believe in the value of it. I think that there were varying levels of understanding of why it was important. I mean, from people who were thinking, well, it's important because it's important, but not really having thought about it beyond that. So I don't think we didn't have any naysayers on the board, but what we did have were people that just really didn't have a lot of understanding, and we just engaged in dialogue and brought examples forward, shared our experiences, and were able to then kind of align.
Freddie, I cut you off, sorry.
No, I
Please.
was just gonna agree with Kevin in terms of, so just to kind of answer your question as well in this process, I think it all stems from who you are as an organization, and that's the way I've always approached this work. And so if we are committed to the community we serve, then we have to be committed to the community we serve, and that includes a bunch of things. And so at the same time, I think at the same time, to Sheila's point, you want to be intentional about what you're doing. And that intentionality in some cases may rub people the wrong way. Maybe they don't understand it. Maybe they come at it and start to question. And I think all those things are good things because it's starting to now force you to think about what type of board members do we want on this board. And that's not a bad thing. I think we don't do that enough at the board level, right? There's a lot of pressures for nonprofits, raising money, connections, managing the books, all those types of things that sometimes we forget the simple question of, who do we want here? And why is that important? So at the end of the day, it's about getting started. You can be in discussions for a very long time. You can be thinking about ideas for a very long time. You got to start somewhere. And the last thing I'll add in terms of, diversifying boards as well, there's creative ways to do it. One of those ways that I've done it at another organization was asking our staff if they have recommendation, right? There's a lot of times when your staff's diverse, but your board isn't. And we said, hey, give us some community folks who you think will be great. And we got a list of like 8 people that then you can cultivate, get to know, and so again, I think it's about just doing something to get you started, not just defining terms, because I think you can get stuck in that cycle for a very long time.
Yes. And just one last thing, Barbara, with everything that Freddie and Kevin has said. So one of the things I also think about, it's the importance of clarifying the board's mission and values, right? So is that in your mission, right? So when people are looking at your board, thinking, candidates in the community, that they see that is actually included in your mission statement, that this is something that we do, right? And also, so that your board members are aware of it as well. But it should be clearly identified in your mission and vision statements.
Yeah, to that point, Sheila, we actually have a it's not a part of the mission statement, but we have a separate DEI statement that sits on SAGE's website that talks about our commitment to DEI. We also have a separate board DEI statement that applies to the board. So we want to make sure that it is prominent, as you point out.
Great.
Makes sense. That makes sense. All right, so people are eager to get started. They're working on it, but I think when I talk to people, their fear is that they haven't set up the situation in such a way that the new voices that they are bringing into the room don't feel tokenized, don't feel like they've just been recruited for that one thing that diversifies the board, or don't feel like they are sort of the outlier on the board. How would you suggest that organizations sort of think that through and prepare not to be that organization that does that?
Well, one of the things, and I said this up front when I was kind of introducing myself and we were talking about diversity. No individual is just one thing, right? And so I think it's important to have a very open and honest dialogue with a potential board member about why you're recruiting them, because nobody wants to be recruited just because they're Black or just because they're a woman or just because they're transgender. But I think it's important also, if that is a recruitment priority, to bring that voice onto the board that doesn't exist, to express that to the person, that that is one of the aspects of their person that we want to utilize. But it's not just about that. We have a whole list of skills and capabilities that we're looking for in board members, and every board member brings a unique set of skills and capabilities and experiences. That one aspect being among them, and we hope that they will bring that to the board, but it's not the only reason that we're recruiting them.
Sheila, you're nodding. Do you have further thoughts?
Sure. So, I think it's important that, when boards are looking for diverse individuals, that they make sure that the board is welcoming of those individuals, once they get there. So, so when I think about, some of the ways of making individuals feel welcome is through assigning them a mentor, right? Someone that they could, actually ask questions to a person who, they may not feel comfortable, saying it, yet, in a group setting. Also, so be intentional about inviting board members to share their perspectives and their opinions and their different ideas. Find ways to integrate them into, or not promote them, but include them, on committees, right? So to make sure that their voices are being heard, and that they too feel like, they add value, right? That they're not just a person sitting in the chair, right? At the table, but that people know that they are there, right? That they're not invisible, that they do bring these, unique opportunities. And make sure that they are being heard, and having an ally that, that notices maybe if they're not engaging, try to find out, what that is, So that was just
Right.
one other thing that I would add.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Freddie. And then I'll have something I want to add on to what Sheila said.
No. All I was gonna add to that was, everyone. I think people like to feel valued, not used, right? And so I think when you think about it that way, it's the same. I always ask the question: have you ever been excluded?
Yeah.
People will say yes, and I'll say, okay, tell me, what does that feel like? Like, what happened? In terms of the exclusion, and people will tell you exactly in detail, this happened, and I say, don't do any of that, right? We want to do the opposite of that as we bring people in. So with that being said, I think it's important to identify, what is it that you need in terms of skill set for board success. Once you identify that, then I think then you say to yourself, okay, we're not going to go out now just and pick someone who, we need someone who does fundraising. We're just not going to go out, ask the question and pick them, right? There's a process to it. Building that process means building that pipeline. That
Mhm.
pipeline is really what needs to be diverse. It's the same. The same as when you hire for a position. When
Yeah.
you build the pipeline, that's not
Mhm.
that's and if you got to close your eyes and pick out of that pipeline. The idea is you want more opportunities from that pipeline. So that's why you have to diversify the pipeline. Then from
Mhm.
there, then you can focus on what do we need, and hopefully, in terms of what you need, gives you variety, right? So you have people who can do finances for maybe 4 different counties. That gives you the geography diversity when you decide who to go with. And you might go with someone with a skill set from a different, right? So I think the ways in which we do this is to build the pipeline. We often are reactive. We say we have a board position, we got to fill it because we're doing a lot of work. And okay, who do we got? And it's 2 people. Hey, Barbara, hey, come on down, right? And then we just kind of go from there versus saying, okay, in 6 months, Freddie's cycling off. We gotta, Freddie brings
Yeah.
XYZ skill. We're gonna be missing this skill set. How do we start to cultivate people that can do that? And you got to put yourself in uncomfortable positions to engage with people that don't look like you, who may come with different perspectives, right? And that's the networking part. We do that for fundraising without question. And
Right.
so we have to push ourselves to do that for, diversity,
Mhm.
diversity as well, in order to, kind of get to the outcomes that we're looking for.
Yes. And great. That's great feedback there, Freddie. And so I want to add to that. Some people will say, well, I don't know where to find diverse candidates, right? And so
I don't know anybody.
here's a few opportunities here. So you partner with, diverse organizations. I'm going to just, give a shout out to nonprofit organizations like United Way, who has uh, these different leadership development programs where people are being prepared to serve on boards, right? You attend community events like volunteer board fairs, and attend events where diverse individuals are. And so it is up to you as a leader to find out where those spaces are. And then you can also use social media, right? So are you, advertising on social media that you're looking for, board members? And so, individuals who may not know about your organization, that's a way of them, to learn. So, about you. So you really have to be, again, intentional. Going out and looking for the individuals that you are interested in having, right? So not, always, waiting for them to come to you. And if they're not in your circle, right? So how are you going to do that? So this is, some of the ways of putting, the organization and the leaders out in the community where individuals actually are.
I mean, I do have to say, Sheila, I do a lot of work with boards, and some of them will say to me, well, we don't want anybody on our board who doesn't know us, who we haven't known for a year or so. We want to be, that's how we find people. And I think that is a real barrier to all kinds of diversity. And it's just
Mhm.
leading you to create a homogeneous group of people who will engage in groupthink over all sorts of different
Yeah.
areas.
Yeah.
I think, and you can speak to this as well, sometimes you just have to take, a few risks. You don't know this person, they seem great, and you hope that they stick and they get along and all of that stuff. But if you're only going to go with people that you already know, or people who know someone that you know, then you're stuck in the same circle that's the reason that you're not a diverse board in the first
Mhm.
place, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I could tap into a couple of things. Kevin, I know you had something to say, but
yeah, well, so just a couple of comments. I just wanted to lift up one thing that Sheila said a bit ago about creating a welcoming environment, and what I wanted to say is that so often we focus on board recruitment, right? On the kind of diverse component, right? Getting a diverse board, but what we don't focus on is the retention part and making it an inclusive environment, and making sure that we are creating an environment where board members feel welcome and feel heard. And I think part of that, and Freddie kind of touched on this, is uh, I think you should enlist the board member to help you in that, to understand from their perspective, not to put the burden on them of making it an inclusive environment for them, but to include them in the conversation so that they feel heard and they feel a part of the environment that we're creating on the board. The other thing that I wanted to point out, and then I'll turn it over to Freddie, was this idea about how we build the board and being proactive and not reactive. So one of the things that we did at Sage is we created what we call an aspirational board profile, and it is really a guideline as to what the board composition aspirationally should look like, and it looks at demographic factors. It looks at geography, where we want board members to be. It looks at a set of skills and capabilities, marketing expertise, PR, legal, medical, etc. And we thought very intentionally about, okay, well, what would be an ideal kind of mix of those characteristics, demographics, geographic considerations to create an ideal board. And we use that as a guideline so that we are always watching, to see how we are matching the current board against that aspiration that we have.
Great thought. Just
Freddie?
yeah, Barbara, just on your point about, whether someone should know our organization. I'll tell you, my first board, where I was asked, I didn't know exactly what they did. I went to an event and loved their event. And what it really did was reminded me of programs that I grew up in, that helped me after school. And that speaks volumes. I don't know the organization, but it tapped into something personal and important in my life that made me say yes to that board opportunity. And so I think, again, we can't limit ourselves in who our board could be. We just have to open the pathway for people to see themselves, in that space, the best way they can. And that could be, again, by introducing folks, inviting to events, giving them a tour of your building, just allowing them to see, because once they see, they may tap into something that speaks to them in volume. So sorry, Barbara, to interrupt, but just wanted to share that.
Absolutely.
Now, we know from a previous panel that Freddie has a lot of great creative ideas about how to create a pipeline of board members, right? And not afraid to reach out to organizations and people he doesn't know and sort of say, you want to talk a little bit about that, Freddie?
Yeah, I mean, so in general, I think DEI is, and you mentioned this in your opening remarks, is a challenge in today's environment with a lot of the things that are happening, not only, in the East and the South and everywhere you look, there's always something. But I think, the connection of people is what I focus on in most of the work with the Board Institute. I think at the same time, we have to educate the people around the table at our board to be acceptable of those things. And I do it very differently depending on the environment I'm in. In many spaces, I'm sometimes the only person of color. Sometimes I'm the youngest person in the room. Sometimes I'm not from that community directly, right? And so those bring challenges of how we share things. So I often say, you find the way. Sometimes it's an article to the entire board. And I do this a lot. I read a great article and I say, hey, interesting article I came across. Take a look. And it may give someone an opportunity to ask a question, to bring it at the next board meeting, to maybe even open their eyes to something that they may not, ever thought about. And I think if we can do these things often, I often invite people to events that I'm going to. Maybe they'll never, maybe they don't know someone from that community or someone, and I invite people, and that way, you form connections. So I think there's, and you all can probably think of many more ways to engage people, but I would say that the same way we treat fundraising is the same way I would treat DEI. You want to make connections, and that's what we're all good at in the nonprofit world. So just keep that in the back of your mind.
Awesome.
One thing that your comment just triggered in me, Freddie, is DEI is it's an ongoing process for the board, and so it's not something that is ever complete or done, and there's always learnings to be had. And what we do on a regular basis on the Sage board is trainings for the board. I mean, or if we see an interesting article that we think would help inform the board's understanding. So we've shared articles on intersectionality and on why pronouns are important, and done specific trainings on gender identity. I think it's really helpful to continue the dialogue and the conversation at the board level. So it's not just kind of centered in this board DEI committee who's kind of tasked with helping to diversify the board, or nominating governance who's tasked with finding a diverse slate of candidates. It's really an ongoing dialogue at the board at all times.
Mhm.
Pretty awesome. Sheila, when we were talking before, when we were prepping for this, you said something that really struck me, which is creating a welcoming environment for diverse people, but also recognizing that there are cultural differences and making sure that the board, they feel comfortable being culturally different, that not everybody's pretending that everybody's the same. Do you have some thoughts about that for people, how they create that kind of environment? I'll throw that out to all of you.
Oh, sure. So it's really, once you have accepted, the person as a board member, you take the time to get to know them. Having, retreats, especially for the board, having retreats, having opportunities for the board members to get together, right, beyond the board work. So as an opportunity to network. And so and to learn about, the individuals there. Once I always say, we are strangers, because we don't know each other. But once we know each other, there's something most likely that we have in common, right? And so we have to be willing to engage in the conversation, to learn from others that are different from us, as an opportunity to to educate ourselves, but really, it's really about having a dialogue. It is really just that simple, right? But sometimes, fear keeps us from doing that, right? Because a person is different. But I do believe that there often more commonalities that we have about each other than differences. So, engaging in conversations.
One time we brought in Sheila, this is a fascinating exercise. I'd never done this before. We brought in a DEI consultant, and so all the board was in a room, and she asked certain questions. It says, okay, who here is an only child? Stand up. And so there's that connection. Who here has older brothers or sisters? And she went through a number of different questions to show all the various connections that people have within the room, so that you do begin to see that it's not about the differences that you have, but it's really about the commonalities.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. That's a good exercise.
Sounds
It
fun.
really was. It really was.
Yeah.
That's great. Kevin, how'd you go about choosing a DEI consultant? Sorry, that's not, yeah, right there. How did you find one that was right for your organization?
So, there were we had recommendations actually from a couple of other LGBTQ plus organizations. So Michael Adams, our CEO, reached out to CEOs of other organizations to get some recommendations, and then we interviewed a couple of the ones that we thought their profile best fit our needs, and then align on who we thought we wanted to bring in. It was really just reaching out, networking with other LGBTQ plus organizations to get recommendations, and then narrowing it down through the interview process.
That's awesome. So for some organizations, they can recognize that this is important, but not urgent. And they have other urgent things going on. How would you recommend that they, take the time, take the space, et cetera, to really address this while they're having, COVID, financial issues, all of those things? Any thoughts? Uh-oh. Freddie, you have any ideas? You're on mute.
Sorry, I was just kind of thinking about the question. I mean, I think there's so many different ways you can tackle it. I think the number one, and I've already said this, so excuse for me repeating. Number one is to get started, um, and it's really figuring out, what is that inch of a step for you as an organization? Is it educating your board? Is it just bringing up the topic? Is it, talking to your CEO about it, right? I think it all depends on which approach is necessary. The one thing, um the one thing you do want to focus on that you really want to pay attention to is for what reasons, and this goes back to, I think Sheila and Kevin said this, like,
Mhm.
what is the reason why we're trying to tackle this?
Yeah.
And answering that question for yourself and for the board. And once you have that, I think everything else, in my humble opinion, it gets a lot easier. But if it's because you're getting pressure to diversify and you just want to satisfy that, then tokenism will be at the forefront because you're just picking people based off of what you think you need
Mhm.
now in
Mhm.
terms of what they look like. And so I think it's really important to really grasp on why it is that you want it. And once you have that, I think everything else starts to present itself more clear. Maybe it's diversifying your board. Maybe it is reviewing your bylaws on language. Maybe it's, how you become a board member. Maybe it's looking at the give and get that you have on the table. That's very difficult
Mhm.
to try to adhere to because it's $20,000 and like it could be a bunch of things, right? But
Mhm.
maybe looking at it from those three buckets, diversifying what they look like, representation, inclusion. Once people are in, how do they feel? How they engage? And the equity piece, right? What are the opportunities presented to people in terms of how we go about access and opportunity? I think those are the buckets you want. And you may want to start with equity first, and that's okay. And you may want to start with inclusion first, and that's okay. But it's really kind of what level you're comfortable with moving forward.
Mhm. So
So
Barbara, I'll
Jen,
just.
yeah, go ahead. No, please go ahead.
Okay, so I'll just add, as a person that, does research on this, and there's, articles that say this too, that there's win-win-win, when you have diversity, because it's an opportunity, to create, to perform better, financially, more innovative ideas, higher engagement, retention rates that was already, mentioned, in terms of having diversity. So it to me, it's you have to prioritize DEI because the benefits of it are long-term benefits when you invest in DEI.
Yeah,
You know,
get
go
you.
ahead, Kevin.
I completely agree with you, Rick. I think that that your question, Barbara, is such a uh, um, an unfortunate way to that boards will look at DEI is that it's important but not urgent, because then it'll never be a priority. I think why, and that's why it's important, I think, to have that initial conversation with the board so that they are all aligned and understand why this is a priority, why this is important for the board, for all the reasons that Sheila just articulated.
Mhm, mhm.
Awesome. We actually just have two questions in the chat that address the next question I was going to ask you. And this will be my last one, and we'll open it up to more questions, which is the question of economic diversity. Freddie, you mentioned you have people from your community. We are more and more recognizing that when we serve, communities, their voices should be in our rooms. We shouldn't be making decisions on people who aren't in the room, yet we want our boards to be fundraising for us and contributing, financially to us. So how have you addressed that?
The fundraising part is always interesting. More and more as years go by, the dollar gets tighter. It gets cut a little bit more. We're all asking for monies from the same foundations and the same pockets and the same, right? And I think,
Mhm.
over these, again, at least for me, last couple of years has been really obvious that we have to, think about other ways to raise fund. I think there's often biases and a lot of unfortunate interpretation or representation of different communities not having funds to give. Or I tell you right now, I think people give to things they think is important, the things that they connect with.
Mhm.
No matter what
Mhm.
you look like, where you from, how you, all those things go out the window. If it's important to me, I will give and I'll support. And so as we think about, you know, expanding our reach, expanding the funds, that we bring into our organizations, our communities are very diverse and very big. And so if you got 100 people to give to your organization, and that just may be a great number, but if there's 12,000 people in our community, we got work to do. And so I think, diversity at the board level, at the staff level, allows us to reach into those different pockets. It just, that to me is like the clearest way to think about the economic benefits of diversity, and it's through fundraising. Just because, again, it is one of those things we hold dear to our organization. I would also say in terms of how we manage our funds, right? In terms of what we give, how we get, how we spend, thinking about those things, we have to have different ways of thinking. If we're all spenders, if we all don't have a sense of audit, if we don't have a sense of checks and balances, right, we will be behind the 8 ball. So it all works for the benefit of the organization in many different facets.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Like I feel like there's an element of paternalism in when we talk about different communities' ability to fundraise and to give, because we make these assumptions that uh, that because it's uh, people of color, or because it's women, or because they're transgender, that they don't have resources. And I mean, I think Freddie's right. People give when it's important to them, and that's true of all communities. And I think if you were to say that so we have a give get requirement, and if we said, okay, well, we're gonna we need to lower it because certain communities are not able to give at that level. Well, I mean, I think that's also true of then the majority community, right? If you lower it for a diverse community, you're also making it easier to bring in, gay white men, for instance, on Sage's board. So, I mean, the idea that lowering it only, is benefits one community is it's just false, right?
Mhm.
And really what you should be focused on is finding people that are dedicated to your mission, that believe in what the organization does, and that are passionate about the organization and raising
Mhm.
money for the organization. And there's so many different ways of being able to fundraise. I mean, we often think that you have to have personal wealth, and while that's helpful, it's not essential, right? And even if you don't have a large fundraising network, you can we've created this board ambassador program at Sage where because just as important as bringing donors in is stewardship, right? Ensuring that they remain committed to the organization. And so assigning board members to donors to develop those relationships and to ensure that they remain committed to Sage is also a way, for board members to be engaged in the fundraising process. So I just think it's that we shouldn't make assumptions about what different communities, what their capacity is and what their interest is.
Chuck?
Right. I just want to add to what Kevin just said, and that's why it's important that we build those relationships first, right? That many of those communities, they don't believe in that it's like transactional, right? You're coming to me because you want something, and I've never met you before. So taking the time to build those relationships so that the relationship, doesn't appear to be transactional, and so being able to, tap into those communities maybe that you haven't tapped into before because you have some assumption about those individuals, which can be false, just like Kevin said.
Show up. You gotta show
That's a
up. You gotta be present.
Yes, you do.
You gotta show up and be present.
Well said. All right. Okay, I think we have a time for about 2 questions from our audience. If anybody has any, wants to put them in the chat that we haven't answered already. We're just getting comments that this is great. So, awesome. Do any of you have any final thoughts here that you'd like to share with us? We have 3 minutes left.
I'll share one because
Yeah.
Kevin's point, and I love to reference this. There's a DI professional who spoke at a conference we held last year, Deanna Singh, and she talked about something called the curbside effect. And the curbside effect is, we often use, so you talking about the sidewalk, that dip on the sidewalk that we're all used to using, right? In the creation of that, I'm sure there was, people with mobility issues were probably what was in mind, whether someone in a wheelchair or those types of things. But if we think about everyone who benefits from that, I mean, I use it. I'm lazy and I don't even want to take the little step down, so I even use it, right? But we also think about people pushing strollers. The person that is in the trucks doing deliveries, the person on the bike or the scooter, or right, and all these different benefits. And I think to Kevin's point is exactly how this works, right? When we think about an opportunity for a group that may not have access or been, who isn't at the table, and we say, hey, how can we leverage this opportunity to bring them in? It's not only going to benefit that community, it's going to benefit everybody in your community. And so thinking about diversity in a broader scope, I think is important. I'll tell you, I've never looked at elevators positioning in my life when I go to a mall. I have 2 kids under 4, and strollers are our thing. And now I can't find elevators. And I've never realized it until you get put in that position to think about it. So definitely have empathy as you go through this. Think big picture. Opportunities are endless when you can kind of position your mind in that way.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Sheila, Kevin, you want to say anything else?
Sure. Just in closing, that that diversity matters. It is about fairness and inclusion. It is also about strategic imperative for driving better decision-making, improving performance, and enhancing board governance. I also would like to add, I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't, that applications are open for United Way's leadership development programs next week. And we also have a volunteer board fair on June 13th. Please feel free to connect with me through LinkedIn if you're interested in learning more. I'm always happy to talk about it. Thank you so much.
That's awesome.
I mean, I don't know that I have much more to add. I mean, I think
Okay.
it's been a very great dialogue and conversation. I would just say that this is really an important topic, and diversity matters. It makes us better as individuals, and it makes us better as boards.
That's awesome. This has been great, you guys. Following Sheila's lead, I'm going to put a plug in for our organization, boardstrong.org, where we have a sort of matching platform where candidates sign up who want to be on board. So go check that out. And with that, I will thank our 3 panelists so much. This has been such a great discussion. And, the comments in the chat are like great dialogue. Thank you. Thank you. So thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Freddie and Kevin.
Everyone.
Great.
Nice
Thank
meeting
you
you.
so much. Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.